So I was a trucker for a while, and that comes with plenty of stories of crazy things in so many places. One of my favorite stories, however, comes from a piece of malicious compliance that came together just perfectly. The setup. I tend to be a bit on the lazy side when I can get away with it, and I searched for quite some time to find a company that would keep me far away from unloading the trailers myself. I found a good one that had a 95% drop and hook rate. Drop off a trailer full of goods, then grab a new one that's either loaded or to take to the next pickup. 4.9% of them are either handled by the receiving dock or by lumpers, dock workers hired by warehouse companies specifically to unload trucks. That 0.1% is a list of places that just want to watch you work, or be convinced that you really shouldn't operate their lifts. In my contract, I saw that there was a place where your hourly rate for unloading was stated. Not for the hours that you were sitting and waiting to be unloaded, but for when you were the one unloading your own trailer. I also saw that the contract allowed for alterations to be made to the price of this service to be charged to the customer. As a joke, I put in not one, but two extra zeros. $1,500 an hour for unloading a trailer? Should deter most people. Most people saw that, got a good laugh, then pulled in someone to unload for me. The event. Most people, like I said, were smart. This run was set to arrive at 0300 to a certain clothing store in the mall. Let's call him IB. Nickeled. I'd been to this store a few times before and it was always the same manager, Mr. Dime, receiving me, and it was always the same runaround. If I wanted to get unloaded, I had to wait for someone to get there, then I'd have to sit and wait while the poor kid back there got the load off. Then I'd have to wait for traffic to ease up to get out since it was always almost 10:30 by the time I finally left, leaving me with only a couple of hours left on my clock to get to a truck stop for the day. I got there and, yep, Mr. Dime had come in to accept the load. It was always hard to be smart at 0300, and I can only imagine that was part of Mr. Dime's usual runaround. This time was a bit different for a few reasons. 1. He smelled like there was a bit of an herbal calming remedy about him to settle his nerves for the night. 2. He said that he was completely understaffed and there was no one around to unload me, so I'd have to do it myself. 3. I couldn't stay to my usual time because he had to leave before 0500. To be fair to him, I did try and say, sure, but my contract says. I don't give a damn what your contract states. I don't have anyone in until the store opens, and I've got an appointment that's more important than some trucker's contract. Just unload it yourself. I considered it for a moment and went back up to my truck to get my tablet. This was in 2019 before the virus and the company had just swapped over to tablets for certain things, like signing off on expenses or getting permissions. Mr. Dime was fuming when I came back and handed him the tablet. Just read through and sign with your finger. He didn't read through. I had 20 pallets at 1,500 pounds each. The only available tool to unload was a manual pallet jack. I started my work clock and began unloading at 0315. At 0500 Mr. Dime looks on in satisfaction to see me about 3/4 of the way through as he's out the door. At 0515, Mr. Dime's replacement, Mr. Quarter of the day shift, comes running in with his face white as a sheet to see me taking off the fourth to last pallet. Please tell me that I'm reading this wrong, he pled fruitlessly. I wish I could, I lied, knowing that Mr. Dime was about to be up a muddy creek with a spoon. I even tried telling Mr. Dime what he was getting into, but he just skimmed and signed. He slumped. Wait here. I need to call my district manager. Better be quick. I want to be out of this lot by 0630 to beat the morning rush and get a good breakfast. He ran back and I continued unloading. When I finally got the last pallet off at 0550, I turned off my time clock as the district manager came in. We'll call him Mr. Dollar just to keep consistent, followed both by Mr. Quarter, who was looking somewhat relieved, and by Mr. Dime, who was somewhere between terrified and furious. You're Mr. Arrow? Mr. Dollar asked, holding a printout and looking to it for the name. That's me, I agreed. I take it they sent over the contract Mr. Dime signed? Yes, and that's just it. Mr. Dime is accusing you of forging his signature on this since there's no way he'd sign off on a multi-$1,000 contract just to unload a trailer. Especially since he claims you insisted on unloading it yourself. I whistled. That's a heck of an accusation. Hey, is that CCTV I see up in that corner over there? I asked, knowing full well that the entire loading dock was covered by a slew of cameras. The one I pointed out was positioned just right to catch the whole conversation at the door. Mr. Quarter, get the footage, Mr. Dollar said. We don't have audio but we do have visual on them. Mr. Dime lost his fury and now just looked petrified. The fallout. One review later and I was grinning like a loon back to my truck. I called my manager, booked some home time, and walked away with enough money to last to the end of the month. The next time I went into that IB nickeled there was a new, much more sensible manager who always had a man on staff to unload the trucks. Edits, some typos. And to clarify a few things. 1. Yes, I milked it a bit, though not as much as some people might think. Like I said, I was regularly there from 03:00 to 10:30 at the latest. Throw on top of that the fact that I've never been the healthiest of individuals and it took me that long to keep from hurting myself. This was during the summer in SoCal, and even at night it was still approximately 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside, hotter in the trailer without any air conditioning. A fat man with no AC is going to take all the time he wants. 2. Why didn't Mr. Dime do any of this himself and why did he lie? Truckers tend to get the short end of the stick, even when we're regulars to a place. This was the 5th or 6th time I'd been there spread out over the course of 4 months or so I was familiar enough that I was recognized at the dock but not so much that they really cared to keep track of it. The manager figured he could probably get away with shafting me since he claimed I didn't like how long I was waiting. I feel like he's made other truckers get to that point but none of them had hourly rates like mine on their contract. He's just one of many that thought he could get away with blaming it on that damn trucker when it went wrong for him. 3. What happened while we watched the video was pretty anticlimactic. The recording was on Mr. Quarter's phone when he came back and was pretty low quality, but you could still make out that I argued with him about unloading for a minute before coming back and he did indeed sign it. Mr. Dollar said, "You can go, Arrow." Mr. Dime, "Go wait in the office." Now. I got going while the going was good. Down in the comments.
If you duck something up, it can be fixed, most times, and can be used as a learning experience. You lie about ducking up? Well, now that's a whole new issue in itself. Forget whatever it was that was messed up. Had a technician at my current job essentially cause $8,000 in direct costs and costed the customer upwards of $70,000. He was brought to a meeting with managers etc. The problem was found and a procedure made for it. Had another guy lie about having done an oil change and brakes during a general service, and he was let go. It like parents always say, tell me and I'll be upset. Lie to me and I'll be angry. Just cause it wasn't up there and I was curious. 3.15 to 5.50 equal 2.58 hours. At 1,500 per hours equals $3,870. That is a nice chunk of change to be walking away with. Mr. Penny made you into Mr. 4K. I hope whatever appointment he had was worth it, lol.